No two people on your team hear you the same way. That's not a communication problem. That's neuroscience. And once you understand it, everything about how you lead, motivate, and connect with people changes forever.
Now available. Awakening I Am, Internal Awareness in an AI Age audiobook, and our Victory Builders platform, which integrated system for founders who execute, is open, links in the description. A skill that can and needs to be developed and harnessed, worked on daily, because it's like an onion. It has nuances. We have the communication style, identifying the weak points and strong points of your team or your staff. Even as parents, when we're leading our children, it still has the compassion points. How do we relate the message that we want to see? When I first started in business and I took a course on business building, they talked about the messaging and how the leader sometimes give a message to sub leaders and that message get lost, and by the time it gets down to the people that are executing, that message has changed. So the debate was, is it that the people who are working with the people didn't understand the message from the leader, or the people that listening to the leader couldn't communicate the leader the needs of the people at the bottom, or there's just not a clear enough communication? The message isn't lost. The message is clear and rehearsed a number of times. It comes from good leadership, that even the janitor understands the mission. And sometimes, not all the times, sometimes we find that harmony, and that harmony can lead to greater impact. My name is NaRon Tillman. This is another episode of Walk in Victory, where we sit you at the feet of the masters and have conversations to help you evolve your life. This leadership conversation today is going to be unique because we're going to dive into neuroscience and leadership and how impactful that can be. And you all know I love to talk about mindfulness and neuroscience. Our master today is Mr. Yoshi. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. So, explain to me how your take on leadership and how you were able to come up with this blend of neuroscience, leadership, and communication mastery.
So I started off my career in IT and then moved into engineering. So that's my background, is really as a geek. I like to understand how things work or don't work. And when things aren't working, I tend to do root cause analysis. And I've started, at work doing more people responsibilities. I started getting feedback that I wasn't that skilled at my people skills. And I really wanted to understand where I was missing the boat, as it were. And that led me to study two different areas. One was emotional wellness, and the other one was behavioral neuroscience. And really, through what I had learned in these areas, my life completely changed. My understanding of myself and my emotions, and how to recognize them, name them, recognize where they're coming from, recognize my triggers and things of that nature. And also to recognize that, or understand, what is the workings of our brain? How does the different parts of our brain, whether it's the brainstem, the amygdala, which includes the hippocampus, the limbic system, and then our cortex and our prefrontal cortex, which is our executive thinking center. How does that all process information? And understanding that there's this whole element of subjective perception, which means, or let me ask it this, do you think, NaRon, that anybody you know sees, understands, and makes sense of the world exactly the same way that you do?
No, no.
Why is that nobody else
There
does?
may be there may be elements where we intersect, and that's where you find your tribe at, right? Your people that you have the same, maybe some value systems and things as such. But I think that we all view the world through unique lenses, and it gets a little tricky when it comes to religion.
Yes, well, certainly. So
Yeah.
what's funny is, do you think that let's call it subjective or unique way that we each interpret the world plays a way in how we hear one another?
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
So to me, this was like this wake up moment that when I started to understand how the brain works on subjective perception, and that no two people will interpret or see or make sense of the world exactly the same way. And yeah, we do have touch points, whether or not, let's say in religion, as you brought up, if we have a shared religion, then we will have or possibly have shared value systems or shared rituals or stuff of that nature, or if we're from a similar community or some things of that nature. And so there's definitely intersect points, but yet there's still that unique subjective piece of us. And if that plays a role in how we hear one another, then what are we doing to address the gap? The gap meaning I am speaking to you and you've been speaking to me. We're both speaking to your audience. But if there's the understanding that no one's going to hear each other the exact same way, that means that no matter how clear I try to be, no matter how many times I repeat myself, there's a gap between what I'm saying and what you're hearing. So I know that's happening, but what I don't know is what the gap is, meaning what did you hear exactly as I said it? What didn't you hear exactly as I said it? And even more nefarious, as it were, is that part of this filter system will sometimes literally change whole context of words or meanings. Sometimes our brains will literally delete words and we won't hear them. And then we have many biases that are playing a role, again, kind of at that hidden layer where my conscious brain, scientists say, can process about 10 bits of data a second. What is 10 bits? I don't know. But our subconscious brain can take in 10 million bits of data a second. So that's 10 million bits of data coming in the raw feed. And then by the time we're able to consciously start thinking and making sense of information, we only have a very, very, very small amount of that data. And so if in our communication, and you use these words in the very beginning about good or practiced communication, and I'm not sure what that means, but if we don't recognize that out of the gate, by default, there's no way anyone is going to understand me 100% when I'm talking, and I don't find a way to close that gap, then there's always going to be miscommunication.
Well, what I mean by like practicing communication or good practice communication is one, like you said, I'm going to refer back to the reason why you're here, the people skills, right? So that didn't mean that you didn't have the good information. It was the practice of assimilating the information so that the people could get it. A lot of times the practitioner is so caught up in the practice that we may be a bit heady, right? And not having communication, being able to break down those words into a practical way that grandmother could understand it. And there's going to be a gap. And that's what I mean by practice communication. So we have to sit and rehearse. We did the hard part. We have the information. Now we have to rehearse how to assimilate the information. And usually people who are heady don't have the time for that.
So, one of the questions I often ask somebody that I'm working with is, when you give an assignment or you ask somebody to do something, How often do you get back what you asked for the very first time?
Mm.
How often is that the right thing? Meaning you don't need to go back and go up, back and forth and provide more clarity after the deliverable. And honestly, it is relatively low, meaning below 50% on average that people tell me that they get back what they asked for the very first time. And that means 50% of the time or so, people are spending time later in the process fixing or readdressing the communication gaps or the understanding gaps to get work done. And while people tell me I never have time to make sure everyone understands me, I sometimes call like, okay, really? Because you're probably spending time later that is even also precious, but also using the time of this other person or other people who already think they did the work to fix the gaps that if you spent a little bit more time in the beginning, could have saved a lot more time later. All right. And so what happened was that when, as an engineer, when I started understanding that this is how the brain is working, then when I decided to make this switch into leadership development work, this has been a core focus because our main way of interacting with each other is through communication, whether it's written or verbal or whatever. And if the base process of understanding one another is not in line with the way that we are acting, meaning I just say something to you and I say, oh, any questions, NaRon? And you're like, nope. And I'm like, oh, good, that means he has it. What actually just happened is nothing, meaning I said something, your brain interpreted it in some way. I didn't ask you how your brain interpreted it. I just asked you if you had any questions. And your brain is thinking, based on what I think I understood, no questions. But that doesn't mean you understood me.
Yeah, yeah, that's based on what I understood. It's funny. I just wrote a book, Awakening I Am: Internal Awareness in the AI Age, and I'm dealing heavily with this. The subconscious mind needs to be prompted properly too, and a lot of times we vaguely talk to ourselves. We talk in vague chunks, right? I want, opposed to I am. I wish. I hope, like these low vibrational self-talking points. However, what I found, um, and what made me to write the book as I was learning AI, prompt engineering which was the first term that later would turn into context engineering. When I was doing AI, I would have literalists back and forth because I was prompting without context, without proper context. So the agent is spitting back information to me that I'm like, well, where's the disconnect? The disconnect wasn't in me. So the better I got at prompting or practicing the communication of prompting, the better my results. And it's the same thing with transforming our mindset, right? Because that was a big transformation for me. You're using one side of your brain as an analytic, as an intellect, and now you have to use the other side as a creator and bridging those two. And then be honest with yourself. Because you could have said, well, if they don't get it, then F it. Right? But you didn't say that. You said, how can I be a better at it? I know that's not a question, but what are your thoughts concerning that?
I'm with you 100%, which is, well, from a deeper neuroscience perspective, there's an additional what I call brain challenge, which is, have you ever had a vivid dream?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever tried to tell somebody your vivid dream?
Yeah.
What happens when you tell somebody your dream or you try to tell somebody your dream?
It's not as vivid as it was when I was dreaming it.
Do you find it a challenge to make sense in words of what you had in your head?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
what it seems to me, and I'm looking for the scientific data to back up this practical experience, is it seems that there's a part of our brain which is great for dreaming, fantasizing, imagining, catastrophizing, etc. And this part of our brain has what I'll call limited sense making ability, in the sense that it thinks it can make sense of things, but as long as it just stays in thought, then it doesn't, we don't have an internal check mechanism. It's only when we go to speak something out loud or write it that we start to realize, wait, that thought, I'm struggling to get that thought out in the way that I had it in my head. And often when people are catastrophizing, if they speak it out, then the whole overwhelmingness of that fears or whatever kind of goes down in degrees, because again, something happens when we verbalize. And so when we are trying to think something and figure it out, and we don't take the opportunity to verbalize it out, then we often run into this unknown barrier that we could easily solve by just verbalizing it even to ourselves out loud. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that's where, like, what I started to do, if I have a dream about something, I'll immediately take a self note when I wake up, so that I can try it as much as possible, especially if it's something that I was like, oh wow, that was a great idea, or such. Because other than that, it really
Yeah.
it's gone.
Yeah.
So
100%.
so you got into leadership, and you bring all of these unique qualities into leadership. What are some of the main characteristics that you found as you started to teach leaders across the board?
So really, I bring in a lot of the foundational work for me, which was the emotional wellness work, along with the behavioral neuroscience, and put it within a coaching context. And so I kind of joke sometimes with people that it's kind of thera coaching versus straight up leadership coaching. It's really about understanding, first and foremost, ourselves. And there's many layers at which we can understand ourselves. So at the layer that we're talking about of understanding subjective perception and how that works, understanding that whether or not we think our emotions are not being transmitted as energy in our conversations, they are. And the more we can recognize, what is my emotion going into something? What is my intent in this conversation? How well have I thought through the construct of the work? Meaning, I tell people there's really a handful of things you want to be sure you have clear within yourself before you ever speak to somebody else. First is, why am I talking? What is the purpose of me saying something to someone, and so on? What is the outcome that I want? Do I want them just to understand me? Do I want them to have buy-in? Do I want them to agreement? Do I want follow-up? Do I want approval? What do I want? So why am I talking? What do I want out of it? And then how do I want people to feel as I'm speaking to them? Okay. Now, if I can get those things clear, then everything that's going to get built from that is going to be clearer. Then I need to take into account, well, who's my audience? And like you were saying, what's the context? What do they understand about what I'm going to be saying? What is my familiarity and their familiarity with me? So how casual can I be in this conversation? And then I use this GPS analogy. So do you ever use a GPS for getting directions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What
Yes.
are the two key data points a GPS needs to give you good directions?
Where you starting from and where you ending up.
Right? How often, however, do you get into a conversation and you're thinking, what are they talking about exactly? What? All right. And while you're trying to figure out what they're talking about, you're not really listening to what they're actively saying, because you're trying to. So like a GPS, we need to make sure that anybody we're talking to understands clearly our starting point and our ending point. So in the sense of the pre-work, knowing why you're talking and what you want out of it is those two points. But now I need to communicate that when I'm starting to talk, and therefore that helps people. So these are the starting points of often a coaching program, is helping people recognize the mechanisms, what we can do about it, and how we just in some simple steps start to really improve our communication skills and therefore our collaboration skills. And then we build from there an understanding interpersonal skills, emotional management, we call it emotional intelligence in the world today, but it's more emotional awareness. And then how do we continue to constantly experiment and practice different skills that we can use today, not something that's a syllabus that I need to learn and then find a way to practice, but something that I can actually do. And then the biggest or hardest challenge I find is not the knowledge of these things. It's rather, how do I make these practices part of my life, part of my habit? Like, so we don't do a New Year's resolution thing, which is, I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm going to do this. And then, you get to February and you don't even remember what the resolutions were. Is really supporting people in the accountability and the partnership so that they do put these things into practice in their lives.
Let's lean back a little bit in the intake process, because it's almost like you're building a personal customer avatar. A lot of leaders, like if they're selling something, they know the customer value journey, right? They sit and they dream about that, and they dream about, and so all of the website, all of those nuances for the external branding is right. But then now you're saying, let's marry that together, because you know where you want your customers going to be. But how are you going to get that point across to the workers that you're actually leading? That's actually giving the customer the experience.
Right.
Like Disney, they pride themselves, from what I read, pride themselves in giving great customer service, and they have all of these layers of communication and training on customer service. They don't really care about the ride and all that other stuff. Yeah, that will fix itself. But how does the person feel when they walk through the door? And this is kind of what I was hearing when you were leaning into your process. Am I on the
Yeah,
same line?
you are. Yes, it's absolutely that. There's this guy, Dale Carnegie, been around for a long time, his stuff. And one of the quotes is, people will not always remember what you told them, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And so
Hmm.
part of the role of a leader is to get fellowship. And to get fellowship means people want to follow you. And that is rarely a logical thing. That is much more of an emotional connection. And so ultimately, what I'm working to help leaders with is to build fellowship. And that does come with the feeling component, the experience component, as well as the content component, right? Like the ride. The ride's got to be a good ride.
Yeah, yeah. Because you can you can be the great salesman and then have a crappy end result, and
Yeah.
it's still going to evoke a feeling. It's going to evoke a feeling like they were kind. Like when I was coming up, we had the when someone said that they were in the car industry or they was in sales, the first adjective that people would put in front of it, sleazy salesman, sleazy car salesman, right? And that was a noma or a misnomer that you now have to work away from.
Right.
All in the industry, they had to work away from people feeling as if they were buying lemons, or so they had to change or rebrand how the industry did things, and they've done a good job, because now you can get the pricing online. There's things that had to happen so that no longer that feeling of am I being fleeced is there. And that's not to say that you won't get fleeced, but at least you're not going in feeling I'm gonna get fleeced.
Yeah, 100%. And so I imagine, some of the work you do, NaRon, is also on helping people do their branding, right? And so
Mhm.
it is no small thing to not only find our branding, but to really get it out there. And we're not like such forgivable people. Like once you screw up, right? That's hard to fix that. And so there's, figuring out what your original branding is and figuring out what sometimes you need a fix and how you're going to go about doing that. And that requires a lot of consistency. All right.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
a lot of that comes down to not just the knowledge, but how do I maintain my persistence, my emotional drive through that process when not every day is going to be a win.
yeah, yeah. And that's that's the final thing that we can close on. We're changing behavior. We're changing mindset. And that's not always easy because we get in these loops and these patterns. How do you create, what type of techniques do you use to help create these new neural pathways, these new patterns of thinking when the old person is still going to be living there, right? We're going to create a new neural pathway, but that old pathway is still going to be there. And every now and again, they'll merge.
Well, absolutely. So from that perspective, the old pathway, not only will it be there, the brain has a strong desire to go that pathway because it's known, it's easier, it's less costly from an energy perspective to go the old way rather than the new way. And so, first of all, it's helping people understand what, like you're saying, like there are these pathways, and what are going to be the practical experience of trying to change. So, our expectations are getting set up effectively. That this isn't going to be a light switch experience. This is not just going to happen. And then, how do we deal with per- steadfastness? And understanding, though, that like many dieting programs, it's an 80-20. You're not going to be expected to succeed every single time that you're trying to do the new thing. You are going to fall back on old habits at times. That's not a failure. That's life. And so rather than looking at this as, oh, I failed or whatever, like some people tell me, oh, I in the beginning of the week, I'm like, I'm going to go to the gym 3 days this week. And I'm going to go on Monday and Wednesday and Friday. And as soon as, Monday morning comes, I'm like too tired. And then once I did, I'm like, oh, I blew it for the week. I'm like, no, you didn't blow it for the week. You just blew it for Monday. You still can go on Wednesday and Friday. But if we have the expectation that I'm passing or failing the grade, then it's failing. If it's each time, this is an experiment. Each time you do something, you're going to learn something new. And that's the question is not did I do it right or wrong, whatever that may be, but what did I learn when I tried it or when I didn't try it? What was the result I got? Was it the result I'm looking for or not? And it comes with that self-awareness piece along with the support of the coach, which is a safe place to talk about it, a safe place to start to get a little bit deeper about what are the resistance points, what are the challenges, what do I need to maybe set up in my system of life that will support these new actions, these new behaviors, and which are the ones that are derailing me from or are constantly knocking me off course.
And that comes with spending a lot of time thinking. And thinking is a skill that is under discussed and something that is necessary. If you're going to be in leadership, we spend a lot of time thinking, but you a lot most of the time we spend time thinking about what we want to accomplish, the financial end of it, the customer end of it, how are we going to get better, how are we going to implement, and all of these things. And we're not really thinking through, and we don't see the value of thinking through how is it affecting us, one, when things don't go our way, and how is it affecting us when when we can't verbalize what we see. And the big part of not being able to verbalize what we see is that we start to take on this mentality. And you can, and on this note, if I can't do it, it can't be done.
That's limited thinking, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
instead of, if I can't do it yet, then I just don't know how to do it yet.
So just about getting back to those old internal prompts, right? It's just about recalibrating how we speak to ourselves. Is it
Absolutely.
something
Like
that
when you were
simple?
talking about the AI prompting, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely the prompts we use for ourselves lead to the outcomes or the answers our brain produces. We change the question we're
Mm-hmm.
asking ourselves, we change the answer.
There you have it, everybody. I told you we sit you at the feet of the masters. We've had a master class in leadership and neuroscience and all things that some of the things that you can apply to yourself, which is self-taught. Before I sign off, Yoshi, why are you going around on podcasts and having these conversations? What results are you looking for and share with our audience?
Well, what I'm really looking for is to make the world a bit of a better place. I find the
Mm,
world to be so divisive, so much energy is spent against one another. And I think about my children and my grandchildren, and I want them to have a world to grow up into that makes sense. And that's really why I'm doing it. If people are interested in reaching out to me, if you can put in the show notes my LinkedIn address, that's the best place to find me right now. But yeah, it's really to help the world be a better place one day at a time.
and we do that by having one conversation at a time. Listen, we don't ask you for Cash Apps, Venmos, or Apple Pays, and any of those things. They're good for other shows if that's what they want to do. We want to lead with value, and we do ask that you contact our guests, that you get into their ecosystem. As you transform your mind, you're going to need to monitor what you're listening to and who's coming across your feed, and we only bring you the best. And then secondly, we ask that you hit like, share, and subscribe. Your likes, your shares, your subscriptions help these conversations get into the ears of the people that need to hear it about us too. If you're on Apple or Google, where you can leave a comment, just say something nice. It could be just wonderful show. Subscribe, look out, And finally, we built our Victory Builders platform. Our Victory Builders platform is an all-in-one platform for entrepreneurs just like you. We've limited the need for multiple stacks, whether it's email, CRMs, funnel builders, all blogs. Everything now is under one umbrella where you pay one price. And we're adding more and more components daily, and we wanted to do this. It took us some time to get this together, and we wanted to do this because I remember what it felt like when you get a notification that another payment came out of this and another payment from over there, and sometimes you miss that. And as small business owners, as thought leaders, as entrepreneurs, the more you are invested in knowing where your finances are going, the more you can be invested in becoming profitable faster. So the Victory Builders link is in the description. This has been another episode of Walk in Victory. I am NaRon Tillman, and we invite you to read our book, but we also invite you to walk in victory. Peace.